Hi, everybody, and welcome to the KubeStellar Community Meeting. Yes, I said KubeStellar. For May 18th, 2023. We've got a lot of good stuff on our agenda today. We go by the CNCF standards for community conduct, and I'll go ahead and read those off now. As contributors and maintainers in the CNCF community and in the interest of fostering an open and welcoming community, we pledge to respect all people who contribute through reporting issues, posting feature requests, updating documentation, submitting pull requests or patches and other activities. We are committed to making participation in the CNCF community a harassment-free experience for everyone, regardless of level of experience, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, disability, personal appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, age, religion, or nationality. In other words, everybody, that means just please be nice to each other. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, so now that the formalities are out of the way, let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Actually, I'm going to do a desktop thing here for now. Okay, so we have a couple of things in the agenda. So first of all, you all should be aware, we went through a rebranding exercise on Friday. The rebranding gives us permission to continue to work on the edge space, but also to expand our reach into multi-cluster and multi-cloud specific areas of concern. And we've done a great bit of rebranding throughout our estate, which this includes things like our Medium blog, our LinkedIn tags, our Google groups, our doc site, our domain name, et cetera, et cetera. So if you cruise on up to KubeStellar.io, you'll be redirected to our new domain. Also, if you happen to go to the old one, non-HTTPS, non-secure, you will get redirected. If you go to the HTTPS version of KCP-Edge.io, sorry, I'm not keeping another key around, another certificate around for us to follow. So that'll be the breaks there. So with that rebranding comes a couple of things. I mean, one in particular is I've also come up with a couple of new artifacts surrounding our logo and how we display it. So at some point later in the call, I'll go ahead and post that errata. We are using a specific font for the Stellar portion of the KubeStellar. Here, let's see if I can. You know what? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Medium. And we'll actually go to KubeStellar.medium.com. And you'll see the new branding. There it is. Okay, so we're keeping our old logo, but we are updating the way we typeset our name. Stellar, this specific font, if you're looking to use it for other reasons, and I encourage you to do so, you can look at youtube.com/@KubeStellar, and you'll see that in fact, I use that font in our Quick Start demo. Thank you very much, Franco, for depositing that there, which is now alive and available. It's getting some likes. We're getting some good views on this. In approximately 1 minute and 43 seconds or 40 seconds, Franco details how to set up KubeStellar. I think it's a fantastic video. Everybody should go check it out. And so, thank you very much, Franco. The font that we use is something called Space BT. And you can download that and add that to your font library. It's easy to do on a Mac. You get what's called a TTF file. When it's downloaded, you right mouse click and you install it, and then you can use it anywhere. So that's what I have. So I guess I'll yield at this point. Mike, it looks like you're up next. If you want to give us some particulars on version 0.2.2 of our release 0.2.2.
Okay. So yeah, this is sort of the first release that we're wanting to share with users as an actual release. If you go to the website and look at the quick start, we've been focusing on making a quick start that shows users how to run through a simple example. And the example, of course, is just an example. The scenario includes adding your edge clusters or managed clusters, whatever they may be, and putting workload on them. So it should be easy to generalize from the example in the quick start to whatever you have. So by omission here, what I'm not saying is that we have things as well smoothed and oiled for contributors. But you know, we're aiming to make the experience sort of as normal as possible. I'm not sure how much detail we want to go to. As Andy just said, we do have a video about that. So I think between the video and the quick start, you know, that should be a good introduction. I'm going to stop here and ask for questions or prompts.
Mike, I just put the video in the chat. And I'll also put a link to the quick start now as well. Okay. All right. Thanks, Mike. All right. Let's up next. Bradley, would you like to give any update on the quick start itself and tell us a little bit about, you know, next steps or anything else you've got planned for us?
Yes, so as Andy and Mike mentioned, we have a quick start that shows have a very simple example that let user to install KCP-Stellar and deploying a simple HTTP server workload into clusters. And in this case, we are using two kind of clusters. We can show that the one-to-many functionality of KubeStellar. As the next steps, we are working and to provide an extended example where we provide more details about the functionalities of how the mechanism inside the KubeStellar works. And also there we are going to provide instruction that the user can follow so that they can deploy KubeStellar, bring their own Kubernetes clusters per se.
Okay. Very good. All right. Any questions for Braulio? Okay. All right, folks. So I put this on the agenda. I wanted to ask for the community's feedback. I created what I call a KubeStellar Infomercial. I think some of you are going to get a kick out of this. I could already see the smile on Gerald's face. So I just wanted to give you some background on this. I was flying home from Vancouver from GitOpsCon last week, and it dawned upon me I'd seen a whole bunch of command line instructions given in the demonstrations that I'd seen at GitOpsCon, and stuff was starting to get really dry and was really blending together. It really wasn't making, you know, I couldn't really differentiate what one command line was from another any given time I was going to any one of these demonstrations and presentations. So I said, you know what? Why not make an 80s themed infomercial complete with synthesizer and electric drum kit, more Miami Vice than not, that would maybe had the potential to go viral, would include some of our constituents within the community. Thank you, June, Braulio, and Andrea, and show off a little bit of what we can do. And actually, I'm looking for somebody else out there if they'd like to make a parody of it in their culture. Hint, hint, Yana. So let me, without further ado, grab some popcorn. You'll need a full 1 minute and 15 seconds of your full undivided attention.
Are you tired of adding your clusters to every management console you use? Are you restless because you can't get your workload to scale vertically or horizontally? Need to clone yourself just to keep up with all the configuration variations and resource bundling tasks on your plate? All that frustration can make you cry. You need new and improved KubeStellar. With KubeStellar, you can satisfy all your multi-cluster configuration management needs. Deploy configuration to any cluster on any cloud, hybrid, multi, edge, etc. Scale effortlessly. Centralize your inventory. Customize resources in easily defined groups. Act on status in summarized groups instead of one by one. Let automation tools do their job and return the responsibility of scale to the platform. Preserve direct compatibility with cloud-native projects using common and unbundled Kubernetes resources. Warning: use KubeStellar only as directed. Remember to exercise unabandoned joy as KubeStellar may cause feelings of relaxation, elation, and occasional outbursts of laughter. Running KubeStellar with your choice of Kubernetes distribution and your favorite cloud-native projects may lead to periods of increased productivity and improved operations.
Okay, so I'd like to include this as part of our artifacts for our repo, and I'll ask again next week if anybody's. I'll leave it open for lazy consensus. If next week you have any kind of reservations before the next meeting, please let me know. And if you have any other feedback, I'd be happy to take it now. All right, cool. Thank you. All right, so let's see. One last update from me, and then we can open the floor for discussion. OpenZiti, we've got the folks from NetFoundry have an open source project called OpenZiti. It provides by default TLS secured transport layer for parties that are communicating, and it provides us some level and degree of isolation for people that want to communicate across public networks using private communication methods. And so OpenZiti has been kind enough to reach out to us. We've met each other on a working group for the IoT Edge, and we introduced them to KubeStellar. They have picked up on it and decided that they'd like to do a proof of concept with us, and they're in the process of doing so. If you're not already, if you want to see what that integration looks like, we're in the process of helping them out. But go to OpenZiti YouTube and subscribe to this channel. And when you do so, you'll be alerted when they post the explainer or the demonstration of how they were able to accomplish the integration of KubeStellar with OpenZiti. So I encourage you to have a look at that. Okay, any questions on OpenZiti? Okay, folks, I'll open the floor for general discussion and birds of a feather. Is there anybody out there that has any topics they'd like to discuss? Please feel free to bring them forward now. Oh, we have a quiet crowd today.
There's no question. I do have I'm new to a lot of areas. So how do you compare as cross-plane?
Yeah, so I think there are probably there are other much more knowledgeable people out there on this call that know about it. So I'll defer. I think Paolo might has worked with cross-plane quite a bit. Maybe he can give you some perspective.
Maybe I can take this one, Andy. Thank you. So I work actually with the cross-plane community for a while. We built this provider for IBM Cloud a while ago, and also been talking to Victor Farsik, right, one developer advocate for cross-plane upbound. And so it's pretty clear cross-plane has been really focusing on sort of infrastructure management, providing this Kube-style API, basically using the Kubernetes machinery to provision infrastructure. And they also provide this very nice framework to create these compositions that allow you to sort of define, just writing YAML APIs, for example, to represent some claims, some kind of API that you want to expose to end user, and then create composition that are defining somehow, describing the infrastructure that using the providers, for example, the AWS provider or the Azure provider or Google provider to basically define that infrastructure. So it's really about really defining those APIs and somehow managing provision infrastructure, configuring infrastructure, etc. KubeStellar has been really focusing on sort of workload lifecycle management, configuration management for multi-cluster. So, for example, one possible use case where we could see something like Crossplane and KubeStellar coming together is you're maybe using, for example, Crossplane to provision clusters in AWS or Azure or IBM Cloud, and then use something like KubeStellar. Once you have a certain number of clusters, it's probably convenient to have something like KubeStellar to somehow deploy workloads to those clusters, collect the status, maybe customize the configuration, and do all those kind of things. That's really, I think these two projects are complementary in that sense, that there is definitely value in somehow using something like KubeStellar once you have all the cluster and infrastructure set up to basically manage the deployment of workloads, for example, or configuration or policies. I hope that that helps, Victor.
So basically, the cloud plane is more working with the cloud provider and all that, whereas I'm still using the KCP-Edge. This new project is more of a workload after the cluster is provisioned.
Yeah, we're not for now. At least we're not really looking at the aspect of infrastructure lifecycle management. We are just focusing on the, I would say, on the workload lifecycle management and in general configuration management, because everything in a way is a configuration, YAML configuration in Kubernetes. Once your Kubernetes stand up, basically we can pretty much deploy anything that is YAML.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right, got it. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other topics that we'd like to discuss on the call? So I guess,
Andy, I could contribute.
thanks,
You
Mike.
know, the discussion we didn't get to have just the previous meeting here with Yana about the choice that we have to make about how to get the reported state for downsynced objects flowing back upstream. We have a couple of choices, one of which involves actually, no, this is not really a community question. Yeah, I'll take that back.
Oh, Mike, I had a question for you. That could be helpful for the community at large. I did invite Clint to come to this call, but I don't know why he didn't. I'm looking now to see if there's anything indicates he can't join or something. Okay, he has a daily call. Okay. So he's gonna try and hop on if he can. But maybe since it's being recorded anyway, would you walk us through where you believe I think I kind of sort of found the place where the syncer defines its transport in the code in the client factory. Can you give us some detailed information about what the transport layer looks like between the syncer and KubeStellar core, so to speak? And maybe even identify the places in the code where we have those listeners waiting for connections from the syncer, and maybe Yana can even give us some information about how this where the syncer has where the code in the syncer is for its acceptance of transport. I saw a REST library being used in the client factory on the syncer, so that's what kind of alerted me to that might be the location where that exists. Do you have information? Of course, I'm sure you have information about where that exists in KubeStellar core, Mike.
But yeah, the link you shared is yeah, correct. That is.
Okay, I got it right.
But basically, I use the Kubernetes libraries, Kubernetes client Go libraries. So just using this library inside a client factory. So the bottom part may not be unaware of me because it's inside a client Go library.
So in short, let me just make sure we're responding to Andy's question. So Andy, your question is specifically about the thing that in Go is called a transport, or a round tripper. So in the interfaces, they call the type or the interface round tripper, and the instances in the enclosing or using is often called by the name transport. And you're asking about the one of those that the syncer uses to make connections and requests into the mailbox workspace. You're not asking about the larger questions about how things get from the workload management workspace all the way through.
No,
Right.
no, just
Okay.
talking specifically about
Right.
that transport.
So in short, I think what Yana is saying is, I think he's using the, ordinary normal Kubernetes machinery, right?
Okay.
And he's taking or the sort of the usual pattern for taking command line parameters and environment variables that identify a kube config to use, and calling the normal stuff that so the ways the steps the normal usage pattern in Go client for Kubernetes is one step is looking at the environment variable and command line parameters to come up with a kube config, which it gets digested into something that's called a rest.config. Of course, rest is the import name that can be variable depending on what you do in your code, but it's typically called rest.initial-cap-config. And then there are a variety of type-specific, or more likely package-specific functions that will take one of those configs and turn it into typed client stubs, and away you go from there.
Okay.
And what the OpenZiti people are telling us is that they intercept that regular stack in a way that it is already planned. It has a hook point.
Right.
In this config, you can specify a custom transport or round tripper.
Ah,
And what they're saying is the way you hook in OpenZiti is that you take the config that you get and add into it this interception that uses their custom transport.
okay. Fair enough. Okay. So I think they have a good understanding of where that, so if you're saying it's standard, then it's a matter of hooking it. Is there anything specific to your code line that you're maintaining at the mailbox that he needs to be aware of, or
Well, yes, if this is something that happens on both sides of the connection.
right, right. Where would that be located, Mike? Is there a particular package that he should be looking at?
Well, again, the mailbox workspace. Well, what's in the mailbox workspace is the server. Okay, so
Yeah.
the syncer is making a connection as a client and as a controller, right? It is a client of both the API server in the managed cluster and the API server for the workspace. So we, for the sake of the second connection there, the client needs to be zitified, and the KCP server, which is serving the workspace, needs to be zitified.
Right. Oh, okay. So the KCP server needs to be zitified, not so. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, all right. So that's not something. Yeah.
Or not, right? They showed an architecture with tunneling. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a question for somebody to answer.
I see.
What's the best way to get the job done?
Gotcha. Yeah, that could be interesting. Okay. Okay, we'll have to see, I guess, how.
So Mike, have a question about the tunneling. If we use tunneling, we don't have to do any change on the syncer or server side, right? Expectedly, right?
Well, that depends. I think what they're telling us is actually we do have an option of either zitifying the endpoints or running the endpoint for each endpoint independently for each side, client side and server side. I'm interpolating, and I may not have understood it fully. I haven't had time to read it carefully enough. I know they showed a scenario where one side of the connection went through a tunneler to a ZD unaware origin. I don't remember which side it was. I'm not fully confident you can do it on both sides. I would hope that you can do it on either or both sides. But ultimately, I think the real question here, or the challenge, is that it's about identities and managing identities and certificates. So if you go through a tunneler, that naturally creates questions about coordination or conveying the identities. And I got to stop because I just don't know their answers.
Okay, I have a few more questions for the community, actually two to be specific. One is about, I know that we're planning on KubeCon NA, North America, and we're planning on KubeCon Shanghai. I think for North America, we're squared away. I didn't put in travel authorization yet for it, but I will. How are we looking for KubeCon Shanghai? How is that coming along? I know there was, we were talking about the potential for building a presentation that has to do specifically with the Syncer. And I know we were registering also a session that has to do with KubeStellar in general. How are those things coming along? Can anybody comment? Yes, that question's for, I guess, Yana, for the presentation preparation for Syncer, and the question's for June for the question about registering the presentation for the general presentation for KubeStellar.
Yeah, we have registered one session for KubeCon China in September. Right now, I just submitted the abstraction, and we are working on the concrete presentation. So that's the current status.
Okay.
As for Syncer side, I haven't submitted yet. I'm preparing.
Okay. Session. Okay, next question is, and then I have a third question here. Next question for the community, and I think this has specifically to do with June and Bob. Could you give us an update as to how your research is going on replacing API export and bind with Kube-Bind?
Yeah, I was just doing an inventory inside KCP to see what sort of use of the KCP APIs, I'm sorry, inside KubeStellar to see what use of the KCP APIs it's actually making. And it's pretty limited. It's, there's like four programs that use, a handful of APIs. So then the next step is to take those APIs and map their functionality to the APIs exposed by Kube-Bind. So that's where that's right now.
June, anything you want to update us on your side of helping Bob, or does that cover your update?
I think mostly covered my updates. I just want to add one point, which is in my mind, that I see Kube-Bind as a way to facilitate the service delivery between the service provider and the service consumer. By doing that, the service doesn't disappear. It still exists somewhere, not from the provider side. But in our use case, if we successfully somehow use Kube-Bind for us, our dependency on KCP, especially on the virtual spaces of the API exports, virtual workspaces of API exports, those services still has to be run somewhere. So I don't know whether this can completely solve our problem of the displacement of the dependency on KCP.
Yeah, I'm not so sure either.
Yeah, we'll continue to see whether this is useful to us.
Mike?
Yeah, on that topic, I just wanted to say we do not today depend on KCP to host controllers or pods, and we're certainly not planning on introducing that sort of dependency in the future. Today, our controllers are just run as processes. That's really just a very preliminary state of development. It's completely inadequate, and it just reflects the fact that we're just getting started. I also want to get back to the topic of the quick start when you get a chance.
Mine's just more procedural, so I'll yield.
Right. So I just wanted to let the community know about, the topic we were just discussing in the previous meeting, which is we do in the quick start use a curl to bash technique, which is convenient for people who are willing to trust it. But everybody is always advised, of course, that that's a pretty poor thing to do. And it does create some a lack of version control, because any change that is merged to the source of the curl immediately takes effect, and that's not coordinated with a release directly. So we have issues about how to do proper version control and dependency control. So really the tension is the curl to bash is very short and convenient, but otherwise very undisciplined. The alternative is to make the quick start more complicated. We tried to keep the steps in the curl to bash relatively few, but we tried to keep the steps in the quick start relatively few. So that's the tension there. So any feedback on how you would prefer to see that resolved would be valuable.
Alec.
Yeah, so talking from my experience about quick starts and getting people to run things, more steps, it is harder to get everything working. So one approach we took in Knative, I think it's worth at least look on it, but I think it works surprisingly well, is actually we have a quick start. It's actually called a quick start plugin that is written in Go. So the only thing you need to do, actually, if you go to tutorial, quick tutorial, so the only thing you need to do is from brew to install that command line, binary, which is essentially Go. And then it does all the work to set up kind, install CRDs and all that. And the other advantage is that you can just do brew upgrade or, whatever is your package manager. And then, people get the newer version of it, which I think is another problem where, you have a bug or something like that people are reporting. And then you ask and they have a version, they installed like 6 months ago or who knows when. And where did they download it from, or what exactly is on those scripts running? So if you look here, it's if you scroll a little down to this is just a welcome. Press dot or next, and that's the quick start. Mm-hmm.
So Al,
go ahead.
Does that plugin install kind?
No, you can see the requirements right at the top of this page you are looking right now on.
Right, so that's one of the complexities here. All right,
you don't really, I think, want for people to install system level service like kind. You are talking about trust here that become really problematic. So you have to have something, and also people use Minikube, right? So that actually quick start, the plugin works both with kind and Minikube, I believe.
And that's one of the complexities we're dealing with. We have this system level infrastructure that KubeStellar depends on KCP, which is in some sense analogous to kind.
Yeah,
and
so
in the future,
the only requirements you can see here, right? The only requirements is to have that kind or Minikube. Well, you should have kube control because some operations you may want to do, and then Knative command line, which has that can run that plugin quick start. That's the steps you need to do for the user, but they do not have to do care or anything like that. And especially the nice thing about it, installation is actually multi-step and it's a little complicated. We were doing before, there were a lot of instructions. Actually, if you go back, you can find in documentation instructions how to install Knative, how to install CRDs. There are like 2 steps because first you need to create definitions, then you can actually start services. Then you have to install like another set if you want eventing, or maybe you want serving, you want to install Instio. some other dependencies you want to run in your cluster. It takes care of all of it. It really is a quick start. Literally, you can run it, I think, in 2 minutes. And the feedback I have seen from people using it, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I saw people getting, like we were doing tutorial in Kubernetes KubeCon last year. That plugin is the winner in that area. People after that, it creates a cluster. You can delete it, right? Just no harm. You want to do more complex configuration, it does not stop you from doing it. But for people to get started, it's really easy.
Thank you. I'll note that, one of the interesting contrasts with what we're currently doing is our bootstrap, we curled the thing that gets curled to bash, we call it bootstrap script. It does include optionally installing KCP. So, if we were to do the analogous thing here to what Knative has done, we would simply refer at the start of our quick start the reader to KCP and take no more responsibility for that. And that would indeed simplify our life.
I don't know about that part, Mike. If you want people actually, like I like that commercial that Andy was showing, you have to make it one step. If it is multi-step,
well, but look at the top here, right? Look at the top of Knative. It refers the reader to kind, and it's entirely up to the reader to figure out how to get kind or Minikube. There's nothing here to help the reader with that.
Yeah, but they
Yeah,
click on
so
kind, they have their
you
own.
could do a brew install for that too, right? Yeah.
Kind have very good documentation how to get it installed. I don't think you really want to replicate that work. There are like Stack Overflow and other questions people have. Installing kind is solved problem.
Right. And my point here is not literally kind. My point is the analogy for KubeStellar is our dependency on KCP.
Yeah, so because KCP does not have the footprint that kind or Minikube has in internet, support, blog posts, all that, YouTube videos showing you how to do it. I would say you should automate KCP installation in your quick start. Otherwise, people will just get never around it. Especially if you want, like in this commercial, people to, quickly start with KubeStellar.
Alec, I loves me some brew, so don't get me wrong on this. I think what we struggled with was cross-platform applicability. So I see you have a couple of different versions of this, which is interesting. I hadn't even thought about doing the tabbed, idea here. This is cool. Do you have any interest in joining us and trying to work through the nits of what this might entail to see?
I actually tried to install KCP-Edge on my laptop, but I ran out of time. So yeah, I have some interest to make it easier. I can give you feedback or try to make it easier to use or test it.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And if you look on that Quick Start plugin, it is really simple Go program that just, check if you have a kind, creates a kind cluster, check if you have installed Knative in it, and then start installation, shows you progress, and finishes with, printing instructions, you're now ready to rumble, and, here's what you need to set your kube context to use that new Knative cluster.
Great. Alec, this is fantastic input. It's coming at a great time for us. We're releasing the quick start to the world today, and we think we've got a good first version of that, but we'd love your help and input to take it to the next level. It is not
easy to do good quick start.
No, it's not.
I don't know how many iterations and how many people worked on it. That took at least 1 year of work, planning, and then implementing and testing. That was not initial Knative quick start was nothing simple.
This single page is the culmination, of, let's see, how many months? So 4 months of actual work and 1 month on the quick start itself. So 1 month we've been working on this, and lots of good debate, lots of good ideas. So yeah, please help us out. All right, thank you. Anything more, Alec or Mike? All right. Okay. So, Alec, just as an FYI, if you haven't done so already, go to kubestellar-dev.googlegroups.com and go ahead and join us. And this way you'll have the rights to comment and do all the things that you need to do inside the issues and PRs. Okay.
I will make sure to join. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. One procedural thing, and then I want to get on. Clint has just joined us, so I wanted to get on to something else. So one more procedural thing. Does anybody have any ideas of how we should be keeping track of a feature request list? As you know, we're starting to open up the floodgates, and I think that the way to go about it is to put it in an issue, is put it in GitHub issues. But I wanted to run it by everybody else in case they have some ideas about categorization or, you know, anything else of the like.
Well, I'll jump in on that one if I can, Andy. I'm
Please.
Clint. I'm here from the OpenZiti project, also an open source project, and we were just talking about this exact issue on our own. We don't have a ton of people submitting issues, but we do have some community people asking for particular feature sets, and a board in GitHub is a really nice way to do it. We started to make a community board of community requests, which I think makes a lot of sense and lets people from the community see what requests the community has made, because community requests are a little bit different than the ones that we make every day for our own project, you know. So I started a community board for that very purpose, so I could specifically track what the community wants versus what we want, right? So that's one idea.
That's excellent. Well, yeah, I didn't even know that it existed. Well, maybe I did, and I just overlooked it. What can you guide me?
It's
to
called a
where-
project. If you make a
Oh,
project,
I have a project. Okay.
yep, then you can display it as a board or a table or however you want to, or all three.
Yeah. All right. So here's what we have at the moment, Edge MC cool projects. So this is what I had set up a few months ago.
Yep.
Is this what are you doing it in Kanban, or what is the style like?
Exactly like this. The difference is I specifically separated the community requested features, not just all of them. Now, I don't know if that'll end up being a duplicated effort because you have to maintain two boards. It may or may not. There might be a way to apply a filter on here that lets you show that it's community, like by adding a tag to the issue.
Yeah. Okay.
I know I like being able to track the community requests separately.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Like it would be something like you could put actually not only the tag, but you could put in I'm gonna get to you, Mike, sorry. You could also put in, this is pretty cool too, like under issues, when you hit new, we could do a template that is actually a community-based feature here, and then have it, you know, you have to identify like who are you and what community do you represent, right? That's cool. Okay. Yeah, Mike.
I was just going to first check my understanding. The stuff you're just showing, that's all driven under the covers by tags, right? Sorry, labels.
Yes, correct. It is
It's labels,
driven by
right?
tags.
Right. So in some sense, maybe the more fundamental discussion is, or the more fundamental idea is using labels to organize this. And really the first question is, you know, how do you want it organized and represented in labels? And then you can talk about how to present views of it on these various ways of viewing it.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to go look and find my labels. It's in another view. Okay. Yeah, I think it's, yeah, so does anybody have, I mean, right now, today, our labels that we have quite a few. I mean, maybe, in fact, probably too many, but I'll just open a sample one here. Is there a one on community? Community meeting, okay. Does anybody have, a preference as to what we should use as a tag for community-based feature requests or issues?
Well, let's just first start with feature requests, period. Do we
Yep.
have a label for feature requests?
Let's take a look. We do.
So that's the first answer.
Yeah.
Right. And in fact,
I'm okay
I
with
would
that.
say,
Yeah.
I would say, you know, let's first, I don't like the idea of second-class citizens.
Mhm.
You know, so my first inclination was to say, let's first be clear that you know, feature request is a feature request. And any secondary classification is secondary. And I would not emphasize it any more than absolutely necessary.
All right, we have it here. Okay, so we do have this. Okay, so does anybody else have any, and it automatically inputs the label. So maybe it's just a matter of using what we have. So does anybody have any other ideas or suggestions or preferences? Alec, anything from Knative?
It's we have the separate like triage that we do of like issues and you know, first good issues and things like that. But as far as community request, I think what works the best was the Slack, you know, discussions, not asking people to, well, we ask people to open issues from Slack, but, you know, people just ask questions in Slack. And then if that question or issue or community request was already, you know, going on, you can just point them to existing GitHub issue, or one other, which we really like, but not, I think it works with every project. In GitHub, you have something called, I think it's called discussions. I don't know if you looked into that. The nice thing about it is that with Slack, it's very easy, you know, things scroll down and people never find it out, or, you know, the history kind of disappear. So if that is more open-ended, like you do not, like not clear when it should be implemented or who should be implementing it, it's very good idea to open new discussion, because then, you know, you have the history of people, you can just refer them back. Oh yeah, we had somebody asking, could you, you know, add your comments to the discussion there?
Yeah, can I add? I think this idea of discussion is a really important part of it, right? People have ideas and they overlap with other ideas. And, you know, one of the things that a project needs to do is really have some discussion of these ideas that are coming in and figure out really how to shape them into proposals that, you know, going forward and kind of really take all the input into consideration, and make a coherent plan for moving forward.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right, thank you. I know we have Mike on the call from OpenZiti. Mike, we did some preliminary discussions
I think you're
earlier
trying to say
about-
Clint.
Oh, who did I say?
You said Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have Clint on the call from OpenZiti, and we had some preliminary discussions with Mike and Yana earlier in the call about the transport layer and the idea of, I know there was some discussion about using tunneling instead of changing the actual endpoints, whether it be the syncer or the mailbox, which is represented by the KCP interface. And so if you have questions, if you want to roll them out here in front of the community, we have some time here to cover it, and then we'll continue in Slack.
Yeah, thanks. So specifically, I was wondering, the first thing I like to do is when I see an open source project that's looking at OpenZiti, first thing I do is I see what language it's written in, because Golang is particularly well suited to adopt OpenZiti. In my opinion, it's got the best layers of abstraction for particularly this purpose. And then I go and look to see if I can find somewhere in the code base that would make sense to actually bring OpenZiti in. Generally speaking, I would, like when I did it with Ajax Foundry, which is what I did just very recently, it's done in a way where you can run with OpenZiti or without OpenZiti. You know, there's a way you can just choose to use classic underlay transport, or you can use the overlay if you choose to. I totally understand starting with a tunneler. When you already have a server and you already have a client, personally, I think it makes more sense to just bake the connectivity directly into the runtime itself. That way, you don't have to have that tunneler running. You can always choose to add the tunneler. You don't need to take the SDK and bake it into the application. either server side or client side. But having the ability to do it, I think, is a really powerful, interesting feature, particularly if you're having a desire to be less attackable, to reduce your attack surface by having no ports listening on your from your server, or ports being connected to firewalls that need to be opened, whitelists that need to happen, that sort of thing. So I was talking to the fellows yesterday, and I thought this was a cool project, and I wanted to go and take a look, and I wanted to stand up the quote unquote the server, so that I'm brand new, like literally started looking at this yesterday. I wanted to start up the server, and then I wanted to start up a client and see the two things talk to one another. So I did run through that quick start that I just I came in on the backside of. Very successful. It was very easy for me to follow all the steps. I did not know what I was doing when I followed it. So, and it all just worked, which is, I think, a pretty important test of a quick start, right? Like somebody who doesn't know what they're doing was able to actually see it be successful. So then my natural inclination as a developer is to replicate what the quick start is doing, and yet figure out how to do that as a developer, just as a developer, run the server, run the client locally in my IDE and GoLand, and then figure out how to wrap OpenZiti into that mix. So I was looking for some help as to where I would go as a developer. If I wanted to come to the project and I wanted to contribute, how would I bootstrap myself as a developer?
Okay, I can speak to that. There's two things I would point you to. If you go to the website in the documentation of the current POC, there is an outline on the navigation panel on the left. It's called Details. You'll see an architecture diagram. So that'll show you what talks to what. You'll see the managed cluster in the bottom corner called Edge Cluster. Everything else runs in the center. And you see what's called out is there's a Edge Service Provider Workspace, which is a KCP workspace. So the server for that is a KCP server. And then there are various controllers that are talking to that. And there are also various workspaces. There's the inventory management workspace. All these workspaces are provided at the moment by the same KCP server. So the server you would be dealing with is a KCP server. A more detailed, slightly more detailed, and somewhat aspirational walkthrough that's more articulated and shows the steps more individually there's an example. Again, if you look at the navigation panel on the left under the POC, you'll see an example that walks you through a little bit more slowly.
The example scenario?
Yeah. So we're running short on time, so I'll stop there. Those are the first pointers I'd give.
Okay, so it sounds like everything is built and consumed from KCP, the executable, correct?
I'm not quite sure I know what you mean by built and consumed.
So the server is KCP. So an executable called KCP is presenting a server, and then
on the center side, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a center and edge or managed cluster.
Yeah, you'll forgive me, I don't know the terminology. And then the inventory workspace, for example, communicates to that server, is also
well,
built
no, the inventory workspace is an abstraction served by that server. So what KCP does is it takes Kubernetes and adds a layer of virtualization or organization. So in KCP, you can have multiple logical clusters, each of which acts like a Kubernetes cluster, or more precisely, the API server and the associated machinery. So all the workspaces are in the current POC implemented by one KCP server. They are sort of virtualized API servers.
Right. So what I was trying to figure out is where the interactions are between one or more of those. That's where OpenZiti would fit.
Right. So in Kubernetes, the interactions are between controllers and API servers. So in the center, there's one API server, the KCP server, and then there are a few controllers. You'll see them again in that picture. So that's all the interactions in the center. And then between center and edge, there's the syncer that Jana wrote. It talks to two API servers, the one locally in the managed cluster where the syncer is running, and then the one in the center that is implementing the various workspaces.
And as a developer, do you run all of these things all of these services in one IDE?
So I, do, well, I didn't use the word service. Let me ask you what you mean by service.
Well, it depends. Does depend. It's not a Kubernetes service, right? It would be some API endpoint. So at somewhere there's some executable, some workload that is doing something and presenting a port on the underlay. That port accepts HTTP requests or direct TCP connections or something. It provides a service, right? So everything you were talking about is in the Kubernetes space and running in a Kubernetes cluster. What I'm trying to figure out is how I can run the same thing that would run inside of a Kubernetes cluster, but locally as a developer, or do you just attach remotely and debug when it's deployed into the Kubernetes cluster itself?
As I was mentioning earlier, you might not have been here. Our current level of development is less mature than that. The controllers that you see in our architecture are not running a cluster. They are processes. They're just run on a host machine somewhere, somehow. Our Quickstart has, a script that launches the controllers. Actually, not the Quickstart. We have a bash script that launches the controllers. As a developer, I launch them individually typically. And yeah, so the actual processes that get run are the KCP server and the KubeStellar controllers. And I will run at most one of them typically in my IDE at a time. And of course, you're free to do whatever you want, but they're all just processes at the moment.
Yeah, cool. So the controllers communicate to the KCP server itself.
Exactly, and that's the Kubernetes architecture. Controllers talk to API server. That's how everything integrates to the API server.
Gotcha. And so when you're doing development, you just run KCP locally, and then you run one of these controllers locally, wire them together, and then when they're deployed in Kubernetes, it's the same thing. It's just Kubernetes is deploying it, not your IDE.
We haven't even got to that point yet. Right now, we just run processes.
Cool. All right. Well, that helps tremendously. So then KCP, the executable, the actual command, I did not see it in the code itself. Is it in a certain place? Like I see Syncer,
Well, like
I see
I
the
said,
mailbox.
again, I think, we were talking about that earlier in this meeting. In other meetings. KubeStellar is, was born in the context of KCP. So KubeStellar does not include or contain KCP. It assumes that you've already got KCP or requires you to already have KCP.
Okay, yeah, I missed that. All right, so that's another. Is it open source too? That's another thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'll go and clone KCP, get KCP stood up,
that's
stood
right.
up, and then I'll be able to run, say, mailbox controller from the. All right, that's what I was missing.
And you'll see that in the example walkthrough.
Yeah. I saw all those processes running. Yeah, and then
I'm saying in the larger example that I pointed to you to in the navigation panel under the POC.
Gotcha.
That will show starting KCP and running the controllers individually.
Cool. All right. Well, that gives me something to chew on.
All right, so I got to close the call, but wanted to let everybody know. Thank you for joining, and we'll be back on the next meeting. Please continue the conversation in Slack and KCP Dev. All right, thanks, folks. Have a good day.